What do we know about the current state of OpenAI's funding round?
What we know is that OpenAI is finalizing its first set of commitments for its 100 billion plus round that it's raising. So this round, which we had previously broken back in December, is up to 100 billion, but potentially even more now. The round valuation is 730 billion pre-money. So if, for example, the 100 billion plus comes in, they'll put it back out to 830 plus in terms of a post-money valuation. And in terms of the strategics that are investing this initial slate of commitments, it is Amazon that can invest up to 50 billion. It is Nvidia that is up to 30 billion, and then Microsoft in the low billions of dollars. And then of course SoftBank, a large investor that had led the 40 billion plus round last year, is coming in for up to 30 billion. This 30 billion will be split over 3 installments of 10 billion over the course of the year.
Now, the strategic investors here, we've talked about it a little bit with you, but it's so interesting to me that they really make up the lion's share of this $100 billion commitment. And I almost wonder, to what extent could OpenAI raise all this capital without them? What do you make of the fact that they are front and center here?
It makes a lot of sense, especially because it's such a large round. I don't think there's been a private capital raise that this big that these strategics who have huge pools of capital and balance sheets can actually invest in a company like OpenAI. It's not to say that other financial investors will not invest either. So after the slate of initial strategics committing, there will be actually other financial investors. So we actually reported that OpenAI, for example, is in talks to raise from existing investors such as Thrive Capital, Coastal Ventures, as well as Sequoia and others. So we'll potentially see that 100 billion plus even go up even further because of the strategic amounts that it could actually push it out even larger than what we had initially expected.
Now, one of the interesting parts of your story is you had some reporting on the deal structure as well. So you reported that investors will get preferred shares that would convert to common stock in an exit like an IPO, and they will also get a 1x liquidation preference. Explain to us what that means. And then the broader question I have for you is, did all these investors get what they want ultimately here? Is this a good deal for them?
This is a great deal. I think this is the purpose of the restructuring that happened last fall that we had been really closely following, where essentially we're turning OpenAI into a traditional structure that investors can get paid out from. And so these types of terms are very typical of like other companies. And so being able to have 1x liquidation preferences, that's a standard deal term that essentially promises investors that they'll get at least their money back in the event of a sale or a sale of a company. And then also the fact that it turns into common stock is also like really exciting for these investors that hope that the company will go public, which we have reporting on that could be as soon as the fourth quarter of this year. But what I found really interesting is that OpenAI is actually calling this a Series C, which when you kind of when I first saw it, I was struck by it because I was like a Series C, but it actually is interesting because they have only traditionally raised 3 rounds. Those rounds have just been huge. So, for example, this is the Series C, 100 billion. Series B was last year, which was roughly 41 billion, and then the first round, 6.6 billion, was from 2024, and that's not including, for example, the Microsoft round. So when you actually count it up, it is a third round, a Series C, but it does not look like a traditional Series C company.
Yeah, well, I can already see all the startups that will come in saying, we're doing a C. We're doing an OpenAI sized Series C, though. I mean, that is certainly the way some of these rounds end up trending. Although this is a huge number, and it kind of leads me to the next question, which is I want to understand or remind ourselves of the financial situation that OpenAI is in right now and why they need to raise all this capital. What are the latest figures now in terms of revenue and how much cash they're burning?
So the latest figures we still have are from last summer. But what we know is based on company's announcements is that the company had crossed, or we had actually reported this, that the company had crossed 13 billion in revenue last year, so 2025. And then we had previously reported last summer that the company between 2025 to 2030 would spend actually $450 billion in terms of all the costs of training and running its models, as well as any backup servers that it needs. And so this makes sense in terms of why the company is setting out to raise 100 billion plus now, because they have so much spending to come still.
And you mentioned it could come as soon as the fourth quarter of this year, the IPO. Is there any discussion from the people that you're talking to about this round potentially giving them a little more wiggle room in terms of that timeline, or even pushing it out a little bit later?
Exactly. I think what I'm hearing and from the folks that I'm talking to is that it's sort of this dual scenario where if, for example, the conditions are right, you can never predict when a company actually goes public because it is such a macro thing. The company's essentially preparing and laying the groundwork to go public as soon as the fourth quarter. But of course, this 100 billion plus round would allow them to have more runway so that they can time it exactly when they actually want to. And so it could go into 2027. I think it's just that the company is preparing the steps to do so, just because the process going public, as we all know, is so difficult, and that you have to sort of make sure that you have all your ducks in a row.
Great. Well, Shri, I want to thank you for coming on. That is Shri Mupidi, our OpenAI and Anthropic reporter here at The Information.